Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week. In this one, we'll be talking about the 2060 resurrection rumors, the 2021 right to repair bills that are being proposed in several states in the US, and advancement overall for right to repair. We'll also be talking about new research on FinFET process technology and talking about 3nm versus 2nm and what that means for the future of silicon and process technology design, and a couple of other items in the PC product segment. Before that, this video is brought to you by Crucial Ballistics Memory, including the nuke hits targeted for use with AMD's new Ryzen 5000 CPUs. Crucial's new Ballistics Max memory is some of the highest performing memory on the market and can be tuned for timings and clocks to improve performance. The company also has its other Crucial Ballistics kits for a more affordable entry to enthusiast-grade memory. Crucial is a Micron brand and has direct access to its own memory supply. Learn more at the link in the description below. So really quick GN news update first. We have the toolkits finally back in stock. We've been waiting a while to get these in. We got a ton in this time, just like we got a ton of the mouse mats in, and we expect to have them for a little while, but they do sell out pretty fast. If you want one of the toolkits, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net. It's the updated version that we released probably about 4 or 5 months ago, where we changed the handle to have a new custom mold to permanently embed the tool names and make them quick to identify when you hang them on a tool rack. And we also have a couple of other updates, like to the hex head, so that they can get lower down to the screw on like GPU PCBs, things like that. So the toolkit is meant for component teardown, like video card teardown. We've been selling it for quite a while now, and our focus is on high quality tools that will last a very long time, so you get the one purchase approach to tools. So if you want to grab one, it's on store.gamersnexus.net. They are freshly restocked. I know a lot of you have been waiting for them and asking us on Twitter about when they'll come back in. So they're in, they're shipping now. And as always, you can email support if you have any specific questions that you need help with. Very briefly as well, if you have one of the Disappointment 2020 shirts that was on back order, we have those in finalized production now at this point. So we left the orders open for a little while to just make sure everyone who wanted one could get one before we discontinue a 2020 shirt, obviously. And a lot of people ordered, so we're expecting to ship them in about 2 to 3 weeks. If you have one of the back orders, that is when it'll go out. And then for the toolkits, if you happen to be one of the people who back ordered that when it was on back order earlier, those will be shipping out over the next week. So you'll get your shipping notifications when those start rolling out. Okay, first news item is on 2021 being set to be a busy year for right to repair. So right to repair legislation has been in the news for a couple of years now, on and off. It's gained more traction as more legislative bodies have started looking at right to repair and what it means. So interestingly, right to repair extends outside of our segment, outside of sort of core technology, consumer technology, and you may be aware of this if you've been following it for a while, but also into agriculture and other industries where, for example, John Deere tractors and other John Deere hardware has been in the news for being notoriously difficult to repair, or even having the right to repair it if you're an owner of one of the vehicles. So as we get into 2021, there are 14 states that are putting right to repair legislation on the table, possibly more to come later in the year. And this has been making a lot of noise in the Northeast, particularly in the US, but it's growing to a lot of the other states in the US. So far, the states that are proposing right to repair bills this year are New Jersey, Delaware, Florida, Massachusetts, Maryland, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, New Hampshire, New York, Oregon, South Carolina, Vermont, and Washington. In some of the states, the bills will target both electronics and the aforementioned farm equipment. Agriculture in particular is an interesting ally here for right to repair because it's been a battleground for repair initiatives for a while now. The pandemic has highlighted more than a few barriers to repair for other things like medical equipment, such as ventilators, for instance. And for more information on what's going on, or if you're interested in getting involved or educating yourself, some of the best resources are repair.org, the USPIRG, SecuRepairs, and iFixit. And as always, Louis Rossmann is one of the most vocal voices on this. If you want to find a YouTuber peer in the space, Louis Rossmann's channel would be the place to go. So as evidenced by our regular teardown videos, we do have some leanings towards supporting right to repair in most instances. For example, the warranty stickers have long been a thing we've not been a fan of, the warranty void if removed stickers, when it might be something as simple as opening your device to replace, like to add an SSD, replace a RAM stick, whatever. It doesn't necessarily need to be silicon level repair. So anyway, we'll be following right to repair activity this year closely in the coming months, so we'll have more on this one. New research on GAA FETs for 3nm and 2nm. This is a really interesting topic. It's one of those industry topics where it's not PC hardware componentry, it's not new product, but it's stuff that will become new products, and it's important research. So as process technology continues to shrink, the sun will eventually set on FinFET transistor approaches, and just like it did with planar transistors a while ago. In anticipation of this, foundries have been preparing for a move to GAA FETs. That's gate all-around field effect transistors. GAA FETs can possibly take several forms, with different channel materials used in their construction. Gate all-around FETs will become critical for chips as the industry scales sub 3 nanometers. And in last week's news episode, we talked about how TSMC is already working on that. While the future beyond 3nm and 2nm isn't very clear, most foundries, TSMC, Intel, Samsung, and so forth, already have some sort of plan to adopt at least one type of GAA FET over the next few years, and that's nanosheet FETs. Nanosheet FETs are similar to nanowire FETs, but they use wider wires and a wider channel. The wider channel and wire design somewhat resembles sheets, hence the name nanosheet. As process technology gets smaller, leakage continues to be a problem, and as Semiconductor Engineering points out on its write-up, transistors at and below 7 nanometers have suffered from increased static leakage. That's on top of shrinking power and performance improvements. Nanosheet FETs are much different from FinFETs in that they're highly customizable, namely when it comes to the width of the sheets and the channel. So from what we understand from reading the write-ups like the one from Semiconductor Engineering, by making the sheets wider or narrower, manufacturers gain the ability to fine-tune and control a few characteristics of the transistors and of the overall, whatever the silicon is comprising. Those things would include the drive, current, the power, and the performance overall. Quote, gate all-around or GAA transistors are a modified transistor structure where the gate contacts the channel from all sides and enables continued scaling. Early GAA devices will use vertically stacked nanosheets. They are constructed of separate horizontal sheets surrounded by gate materials on all sides. This provides improved channel control relative to FinFETs, as written by Lam Research to Semiconductor Engineering in a statement. Samsung plans to introduce its trademarked multi-bridge channel FET, or MBC FET, at 3 nanometers, with an expected timeline of 2022 to 2023. Meanwhile, Intel stated last year that it expected to adopt GAA nanowire and nanoribbon transistors within the next 5 years, presumably after it gets to 10 nanometer. Given how much performance and life Intel has been able to squeeze out of FinFET at 14 nanometer, Intel likely isn't looking at GAA FETs until at least 5, sticking with FinFETs and SuperFin for the intervening 10 and 7 nanometer processes. As for TSMC, TSMC is likely sticking with FinFETs until it reaches 3 nanometer or beyond, and it's most likely to start introducing GAA-based designs by 2 nanometer, and its 3 nanometer process is called N3 if you're curious, probably 2 will be N2. TSMC has previously been looking at the 2D and 1D carbon nanotubes, as well as nanosheet and nanowire FETs. TSMC's N3 process isn't coming online for a little bit yet, targeted 2022 barring any unexpected hiccups, and it should be at least 2024 for 2 nanometer, if not later. And as a reminder, of course, this doesn't mean that the technology is coming into PC, CPUs, or GPUs. It's likely that it'll debut in risk production first for someone like Apple. Typically is where TSMC starts, and then from there it'll move with other partners, potentially AMD if they're still working together at that point, which seems likely. Up next, RTX 2060 resurrection news. This is one that was posted on Igor's lab, Igor's website, and if you don't know him, used to write for Tom's Hardware DE for a very long time. Pretty well respected in the industry, has been in it for a long time. So Igor posted a write-up about 2060s potentially coming back. We've reached out to our own sources at the add-in board partners that we work with, and we've verified bits and pieces of the story, and we have a little bit we can add to it. But to recap his story first, according to Igor and his sources, both of which tend to be reliable in the realm of GPUs, NVIDIA has not yet finished with the RTX 2060, it seems. Now, in speaking with our own, this could be old supply that NVIDIA is releasing and has found an opportune time to do it because the market is dry right now for GPUs, so it would make sense for its partners to buy these, or it could be a ramping back up of production of the 2060. In speaking with the board partners that we have quick contact to. Our understanding is that it could be either one of those. So the board partners, believe it or not, are not typically kept in the loop as to how exactly NVIDIA is coming up with supply that it's selling, whether it's freshly manufactured or it's been sitting around for a while. But in any event, right now, because of the market, the partners are actually interested in old supply. Typically, in conversations with the board partners that we work with, typically what happens is NVIDIA, at some point when the new generation's out, will approach partners and say, hey, we have some old supply left. It's stuff that didn't sell at the end of the generation before. Do you want to buy it and produce some more cards from the previous generation? From what we were told, the answer is typically no to that question. But this isn't a new occurrence. Typically, NVIDIA does, in fact, have some old generation parts that it tries to sell peddle to partners when a new generation comes out. But the reason the answer is normally no is because the supply and demand scenario isn't quite as extreme as it is today with the 30 series and with, of course, AMD's very competitive parts on the market. So right now, partners are actually interested in picking up RTX 2060 SKU GPUs, even though they're old, just to try and get a stopgap solution into the market while they wait on, well, actually, it's not even waiting on, it's a little bit lower supply of the 2060s from what we understand than the 30 series. But a stopgap solution nonetheless, especially for the lower end parts. Back to Igor's write-up though, he notes that this would seemingly serve two purposes. One is it gives users on older hardware another option that doesn't cannibalize the RTX 30 series sales, assuming the correct price anyway. And secondly, it can also be seen as a move to try and mitigate the current supply issues. Theoretically, an RTX 2060 shouldn't be as hot a commodity as literally any of the RTX 30 series cards, also in the actual heat sense of things, but it's also priced, in theory, a little bit lower than most of the cards out now in the 30 series. So that could swing the pendulum in its favor. Igor also notes that any rumors suggesting an RTX 2060 Super revival are almost certainly false. Having the RTX 2060 Super exist alongside a 3060 and a Ti just doesn't make much sense, as Igor says in his write-up. Also, Igor states that NVIDIA could possibly lump the 2060 into its current consumer product stack on a more permanent basis, but at this point, that's just speculation. Additionally, we asked around to a couple partners, and from what we were told, the 2060 SKU that's sort of, in a sense, coming back, and air quotes there, is the original 2060 GPU SKU, not the cut-down 2080 version that came out late in the lifespan of the 20 series. The reason, air quotes, around coming back there is because, again, we're not 100% sure, because the partners weren't 100% sure, whether it's being manufactured freshly or whether this is old supply that's being brought to channel to both clear old supply successfully this time and to try and state some of the demand. But from the one main partner we spoke to about this, that particular partner noted that it is ordering relatively low quantities of the 2060 as compared to its 30 series orders. So don't expect a huge flood of them to the market, but it does depend on the partner and how much that partner wanted to commit to technically a previous gen product. Although right now, that seems like a low risk bet. Up next, Cooler Master and its showcase for 2021. So since CES was canceled as we normally know it and reserved for online discussion only, Cooler Master ran its showcase a little bit later this year, but they still had the usual product segments to show. Power supplies among them, so were coolers. They had some new peripherals and also a case. We'll be focusing primarily on the core components, leaving the peripherals for another time. But among the most interesting things from Cooler Master's showcase for its 2021 product lineup, it looked like maybe power supplies might be worth note here. There was a case kind of interested in, and then on the side of coolers, there are advancements for Cooler Master's air coolers, and it's got a couple of new liquid coolers as well. The most notable product here is Cooler Master's long-awaited custom power supply. It's been working towards this for a few years now, and the primary reason is that it established its own power supply platform. This takes a while, that's why it's been a couple of years in the making, and this is a platform that Cooler Master is calling the Thermal Enhanced Platform. As many of you probably are already aware, most power supplies are built only by a handful of suppliers. So you've got Superflower, Seasonic, HEC, Channelwell Technology, and there's really not a ton of room for full customization without doing it yourself, which is what Cooler Master says it's trying to do. The companies can customize a bit, so you'll see new marketing points on the flyer every year, where one might advance one aspect of the power supply, like the choice of capacitors or the PFC, and then another will follow suit later. We've also toured some of these factories and design facilities in the past, where we saw the major brands all sharing the same factory floor, but going through separate design processes. Cooler Master's press release states that the XG Plus series is entirely designed in-house and apparently by Cooler Master's own engineers. Although we are a little bit disappointed that Cooler Master didn't call its new power supply the Cooler Master Master Supply Power Cooler XG Plus Master, like they do with their liquid cooling products. Cooler Master's XG Plus series will offer some interesting features like copper machine screws attaching the back and main boards, as well as machine soldering. Cooler Master is also touting a 50% fanless mode for its power supplies built on the TEP platform, and the XG Plus line is expected to launch closer to summer with prices in the range of $160 to $180 US. Cooler Master also announced its new fully digital fanless Platinum series of power supplies. As the name suggests, these units are capable of operating in a no fan spin mode, but they actually come with an interchangeable fan option. Cooler Master states that these units are still being prototyped with availability TBD. However, Cooler Master expects the price to be somewhere in the range of $180 to $190 US, and this is an interesting one if you've been looking for a passive or mostly passive option. Elsewhere, Cooler Master announced several new cases, among them in an open-air Masterframe 700. The Cooler Master Masterframe 700, other than proving our earlier point, can serve as a standard open-air chassis or potentially as a test bench. The Masterframe comes with a sheet of panoramic tempered glass. It's actually pretty expensive to make because the yields aren't great on them, and Cooler Master states that the chassis can be wall-mounted via a 100 by 100 VESA mount. And that makes this a little bit of a competitor to the Thermaltake Core P series, so like the P3, P5, and so forth, where Thermaltake, it's been one of their strongest offerings for a couple of years now. It's taken a little while for other companies to catch on, other than some of the versions you see on AliExpress. And so Cooler Master looks to be directly attempting to compete with this. Finally, there was a set of peripherals, monitors, things of that nature. The crowded gaming chair business gets another useless pile of trash from Cooler Master. But beyond that, there's a refresh of the usual cooling products. So the ones to maybe pay attention to, if we look at reviewing any of them anyway, would be the MA624. It's a dual tower, dual fan solution, similar in some ways to the NHD15, the Fuma 2, and sort of the form factor. It's a larger tower from Cooler Master. There's an MA612 that's a smaller, quieter, in theory, version, and there's an RGB variant of that, because of course. There's also the ML360 Sub-Zero finally coming out, and then the rest are mostly liquid cooler, standard AIO CLC type of solutions. Raja Koduri teasing Xe HPC powering on. So Intel Graphics is making some progress here. Intel's Raja Koduri has been steadily teasing some of the GPU results and progress over Twitter over the last probably about a year or two now, and recently tweeted that Intel had completed its first power on for Xe HPC graphics. Koduri's tweet mentions, quote, 7 advanced silicon technologies in a single package, and if you look at the die shot he's posted, or rather the shot of the silicon on the substrate he's posted, you'll see about all we know about it right now, which is that there's multiple pieces of silicon split across the substrate. So the image itself shows what looks to be 2 chips, or tiles according to Intel, in the center of the package, possibly stitched together through EMIB, or the embedded multi-die interconnect bridge that Intel's been developing. And flanking the GPUs are 5 smaller chips on each side, some of which we expect to be memory, maybe HBM2, and others could potentially be I/O dies, or something else from Intel's portfolio, because this uses Intel's 3D Foveros packaging technology, which allows Intel to essentially mix and match different elements on a single package. So it's hard to nail down precisely what everything is until Intel properly discloses it. We assume this is an early sample of Intel's 7nm Ponte Vecchio silicon, which will power the Aurora supercomputer. So a successful power on is a key milestone here, and definitely a bit of attention that Intel needs right now. Speaking of Intel doing things that get it attention, some partner models for its first Iris Xe and DG1 dGPUs have been shown over the last week or so. Intel GPU news this week included the ASUS partner model getting shown. Presumably there'll be more later. Tom's Hardware mentions another unnamed partner previously thought to have been colorful, but it isn't. And these cards aren't coming to retail markets, but instead will be focused towards OEMs for pre-built systems. ASUS's model is passively cooled, while Tom's Hardware has an image from the unnamed partner that opted for a more traditional dual fan design. The GPUs come with 80 EUs and 4 gigabytes of yet unspecified memory. Don't know the speed or really any other specs of it. They're low power cards, as evidenced by the lack of PCIe power connectors, and Tom's Hardware pointed out the following display ports. There's DVI, HDMI, and DisplayPort. Furthermore, the cards will only be compatible with certain Intel-based systems right now, specifically 9th and 10th gen CPUs, paired with B460, H410, B365, which is that weird chipset that was introduced to help with supply shortages, and H310C. Intel notes that these systems will also require a special BIOS version. The compatibility will be limited at least for the time that the cards are in early stages, but may expand later. Up next, in more process technology news, Micron has been going into some more details on its 1-alpha technology. You'll see it listed as 1A. So Micron delved into some details on its new DRAM process technology. According to Micron on this one, users can think of this process as an evolution of its 10 nanometer class products. So for these, the half pitch ranges from 10 nanometers to 19 nanometers. Micron went on to detail how its new process is aimed at overcoming the Rayleigh criterion, also known as the diffraction limit. Micron states that while EUV, or extreme ultraviolet lithography, has made some promising progress, it wasn't the right solution for its latest process. To that end, Micron has deployed other solutions to get around the diffraction limit. The first is to use modified patterns on the photomask, which is done through computational lithography. Secondly, Micron explains how it uses simple water to diffract light. They said, quote, "The second is to take advantage of the fact that water diffracts light less than air, and to expose the wafer underwater. This is less dramatic than it sounds. We actually replaced the usual air gap between the final lens and the wafer surface with a drop of water. This approach gets us below 40 nanometers, a great improvement and the culmination of a huge cooperative engineering effort, but not all the way home," Micron said. Micron then moved on to multi-patterning to create multiple features, noting how it pioneered double patterning back in 2007. Micron rounds out its explanation with steps involved in completing a die and moving on to volume production, as well as talking a bit about the use of AI and other technology in its fabs. It also has an interesting video with Micron's VP of DRAM process integration, if you're interested to learn more about this. This one's really brief, but it's about supply shortages. Sorry to include another one of the shortage stories, but that's the news right now. Samsung warning about shortages being a potential threat for its phone production. Samsung said that the global chip shortage is likely to hit smartphones next, and it stated, quote, "Because of the foundry supply shortages that have become an issue globally, the supply issue of other semiconductor parts could affect mobile demand. So we're closely watching the implications," as said by Han Jinman from the Samsung memory business side, the executive VP there. Now, this statement to Ars Technica, Samsung talked about how it's also looking to create additional capacity where possible and try to alleviate any potential supply issues before it encounters them. Up next, Intel disclosing a $475 million investment to enhance manufacturing. Intel recently disclosed that it's $475 million additionally invested into Intel Products Vietnam, which is Intel's largest manufacturing and testing facility, and is located in Saigon High-Tech Park, is dedicated to bring IPV more in line with Intel's multi-architecture XPU strategy. Intel has previously invested $1 billion in the facility for similar goals. Intel's total investment to date comes in around $1.5 billion. The new $475 million investment was made between June 2019 and December 2020, according to Intel. The additional funding will further enhance Intel's manufacturing ability and help bolster the facility to address emerging trends in 5G, as well as build Intel's latest core processors using various Intel technology. So that's it for this week. As always, you can subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.